evening. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, May 17th, 2017 regular meeting of the Airport Advisory Board. And I'd ask for you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wendy, would you conduct a roll call, please?
Sure. Shannon Stebbins.
Here.
Louis Worthy. Stephen Huff.
Here.
Mark McKenna. David McNary.
Here.
Jeff Sayer.
Here.
Benjamin Strader.
Here.
Bill Boyer. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two regular members absent this evening, Louis Worthy, who is ill, and Mark McKenna, who is flying. Without objection, we'll consider those absences excused. The meeting begins with a call to the public. We don't have any public present, so we'll continue to the next item, which is the approval of the April 19th, 2017 meeting minutes. Each of you have been provided with those. I would request a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
I second.
Without objection, the April 19th, 2017 meeting minutes are approved. The next item is the Airport Supervisor's Report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Steve Johnson for that.
Thank you. You'll note this time around that you now have memos that outline what I'm going to say and then some go into a little more detail. So we will do our best to get these to you a week ahead of this meeting so that you can process this as opposed to what we've done in the past where it just shows up at the meeting. That all being said, May 10th, we attended a meeting with ADOT for a 30% design review in regard to the Foreign Object Debris Grant project. That was down in Phoenix. No major issues at this point. We're anticipating a 100% design review in June of this year. After that, the project will be advertised, and we're shooting to go to bid this summer for construction late this summer. The electrical vault cursory review with ADOT, we'll do that at 100% once the design is complete, and that's with ADOT's blessing. FAA is reviewing the scope of work as we speak. Comments will follow shortly, and then we'll address those once we get them from the FAA. On May 10th, maintenance staff filled 202 linear feet of cracks, 2 inches wide, 4 inches deep, out on Alpha Taxiway between Taxiway Connectors 4 and 5. That's at the north end of the airport. We had tested this product before. It's a quick setup and quick to apply, actually. We anticipate continuing to utilize the product in other areas of the airport once we fill the cracks and place the product in there. Within about 20 minutes of placing the product, we're good. Northern portion of Alpha Taxiway has some of the worst cracks on the airport. We selected this area for repair given the large aircraft that utilize that taxiway. On Thursday, May 18th, tomorrow actually, to Monday morning, May 21st, Alpha 1 Taxiway Connector, that's the connector at the south end of the airport near runway 32, will be closed to allow us to apply a pavement rejuvenator. As you all recall, 3 years ago, ADOT gave us a grant for $1.3 million, as I recall, to do a 1-inch rubberized overlay of pavement. Well, unfortunately, it's starting to fail. The warranty is run, and again, we want to continue to keep a positive grant relationship with ADOT. And FAA for that matter. So the area that's failing the worst at this point is Taxiway Connector A1. We are going to put this rejuvenator on it. My understanding is Mesa, Falcon Field, and Deer Valley airports have used this same product. They rave about it. I believe the cost is either $2,500 or $4,500. I'm doing that from memory. But once it's down and once it's set and nobody taxis over it while it's still setting up, it should give us an extended life in that pavement segment of about 3 to 4 years. The issue is basically that when the pavement was put down, there wasn't enough oil, and so now all the rocks are just popping up. You drive over it, in fact, you can run your hand over it, and the aggregate just pops up. It's called raveling. So we'll have a contractor placing that tomorrow, actually, and then have that marked off. We'll have a notice to airmen out tomorrow morning. There's a message on the AWAS as of tonight. We sent out notices to all of our FBOs and tenants about 2 weeks ago in the mail. And actually, I notified personally the FBOs as well. So everybody should be aware of it. The one good thing this time of year is the winds are typically coming out of the south. So hopefully nobody will need to use that connector. And if people do, and the wind's coming out of the north, then it's a matter of going to the Alpha 2 connector, back taxiing, turn around, and then take off. So it shouldn't be an issue. The terminal flooring is going to be re-waxed this Saturday. We do that about once a year. We continue to wait for a pavement condition report regarding the pavement. The ADOT came out and did that study. I'm anticipating maybe a month or two, and we'll have that back to where we have written documentation of how the pavement out on the runway is faring. And that connector is part of the runway. On April 24th, we had 21 military helicopters fuel and stay on, and then move on the night after. That's a big deal because it took up our entire ramp. We had nothing but rotorcraft out there. This afternoon, we had a F-18 Marine fighter jet basically land at the airport out of, I believe, Centennial going to Dallas-Fort Worth. So that's another first. Typically, we don't have fighter aircraft unless there's an emergency, land, fuel up, and take off. The FAA Flight Safety Office in Scottsdale, FSDO is what we call it, they have re-reviewed documentation that we had regarding some hang glider operations that were towed off of a boat off the lake in the past months. Initially, their opinion was tough cookies. Not that they quite put it that directly. They have re-reviewed that and find now that there are past FAA legal opinions, some of which date back to 1975, that support that that sort of operation shouldn't happen anywhere within a 5-mile radius of the airport, in other words. And what they've basically told us is, should this kind of operation occur again, they want to be advised of it, they want to send a team out, they want to investigate it, and they're going to resubmit it for another legal opinion. But at least at this point, their thought is that legal won't move on this. And again, it'll be something that shouldn't happen near the airport. And again, it's the tow line that's the issue. And as far as events, April 29th, Hangar 24 had the restaurant at the airport, an event tied to the River Run, which I believe was up at Laughlin. It was quite successful. I was on a Saturday afternoon. And that's all I have.
On the maintenance issues, the rest of the asphalt that's on the airport pretty much dates back to when the airport was moved in the 92 timeframe, I believe. And I know that you and I have discussed that we have a tremendous amount of maintenance work that needs to be done on that asphalt. But just on the taxiway for that last 1,200 feet, what's your estimate of how much more cracks you have to fill? And this is a picture, I guess, of one of the cracks that was filled.
Yes, that's one of the 1.5 or 2 inch wide cracks. The nice thing about this product that we apply is we don't have to do what you normally have to do via the FAA in crack filling. Typically what you have to do is grind it out and then put some product in there. In this case, you put in some aggregate that's already treated, and then an epoxy-like compound. It's not epoxy, but that's what it looks like. It fills everything in, it binds all of the rock together, and boom, you're done. The way we used to do this is what I'll call the 1890s Cooley approach, with hammers and basically beating or attempting to beat aggregate down into the hole in a very labor-intensive, non-effective way. To your direct question there, the segment that we worked on between Alpha 4 and Alpha 5 is 1,200 foot long. It's 50 foot wide. What we filled the other day were an average of 1 to 2 inch cracks, so we went after the worst. And going out and measuring what's there, and again, this is not inclusive. This is cracks that anywhere are from a ½ inch to 2 inches wide. So in other words, think of it as an average of about 1 inch. We're looking at another 3,766 feet of cracks that are out there. And again, these go down 4 inches. Using the cost of this one little segment, and again, it was we only did 202 linear feet. We'd be looking at a cost here of about, because it's $12.60 a linear foot, so we'd be looking at a cost of about $45,600. That's not including the edge of the taxiway. The taxiway is 50 foot wide. At the edge, there's an inch crack running on both sides down there, and then we have a 15 foot wide piece of soil cement that goes out from that, and then you have the dirt. Because of the soil cement and because of that inch wide crack, that's another 3,200 feet. In that case, we'd have to grind, and the soil cement is really a stinker to try to grind down. The number I came up with, again, is that same 1210 linear foot number. That's another 26,000. But I think with the grinding, that's going to bump up. And that would probably be something where we'd have to have a contractor come out. We couldn't actually do it. We don't have the equipment to do it. And if I may, there are a couple things here I missed on my report. You'll notice some memos you have. One is a revision to the airport ACIP capital plan. I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the engineering division is now doing those projects, and they're doing the CIP as well. At this point in time, you will note the project list. Some of the projects you've heard but are not on the list. The FOD project, that's in process, and we're going to complete that I think this summer or later this year, this fall, calendar year. We have the airport electrical vault, and we'll be putting in paperwork on that to the feds for a final grant, for a grant offer in the next few months. Then we are envisioning a master plan update, and that would be in 2018. And again, the thought right now is that'll run over 2 years. So the cost, which I believe is $500,000 or $600,000, basically be divided over that time frame. At present, beyond that, we're not envisioning any other projects. And so that's something that's a little different than what we've done in the past. So I wanted to make you aware of that. You'll see another memo in there in regards to a rename for Hangar Way to George Molitor Way. And that's been run through review. We are going to draft a memo to the City Council and take that forward for their hopefully approval. So that's in the works. And then You'll note a final memo in regards to airport vehicle parking concerns. We've noticed, we believe, there are some cars that are parking in the airport parking lot, the central parking lot, not by the terminal, but by the restaurant, just to the north of it, actually, that aren't paying. And so it's been a couple years. We've had some staff changes, excuse me, since we got the parking permits out. So we're going to go through that process. Anybody who's out there, give them the opportunity to get legal and move that on along. And again, I think there's some confusion with some folks that that parking lot belongs to the large hangar development that's right adjacent. It does not. It is city controlled. And at this point, there's no thought of giving that up. So again, I apologize. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a comment on the proposed ACIP. I fully support revising a master plan, but given the 4-year lead time average for a FAA grant process, and given the condition of our ramp and runway and taxiway, then the way I read this, it would be 2023 before we ever got another federal dollar spent at the airport. I don't see how we can go that long and let the grant program languish and not request any help for the issues that we know we have.
And I don't disagree with that.
Any other questions, comments? Dave?
The city's engineering department's going to take over. Are they doing the engineering part for this?
The city's engineering division will take over the construction, the management of the construction aspects and the ACIP aspects of planning for the projects out there. We still have a contract engineering firm, CNS Engineers, out of Scottsdale. They are contracted with us, and they will continue to do the design, all of the bid specifications, all of that paperwork, and they will actually do the on-site construction management. And then the overseeing party won't be me anymore. It will be the engineering division. So they will have a hand in that.
Is there anybody there that has any experience with airport operations or design or construction?
I don't know. Not that I'm aware, but again, I've never asked. I don't know.
Doesn't seem to add value to the process. Are they going to handle the grant writing as well?
As I understand it at this time, I believe I'm still involved in the grant process. But the explanation to me has been rather brief, and my understanding is I'm still involved in the grants.
Confusing. Okay.
I'll just make a comment on that. At first blush, it seems reasonable to have engineering take over construction project. But with FAA grant, you have initially a contract that goes out to a firm who does all the engineering. It then goes to bid to a firm to do the construction, and that same engineering firm oversees that construction. So I don't see that there's anything left for our engineering staff to spend hours on or be involved with.
And given I'm not part of that division, nor has there been an in-depth conversation, I'm not in a position to answer your question.
That's not really a question, it's a comment. Just throw out. Okay, any other questions? Okay, tonight we welcome Tabitha Miller and Cassandra Clow, who are going to talk about the airport budget. We requested the presentation and certainly look forward to what you have to say. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, thank you. Again, Tabitha Miller and Cassandra. Cassandra actually puts all the numbers together, so she's really the brains behind this whole thing. Before we get started, and I know that we've put the information up on the screen and the numbers are too small to read, but we wanted to be able to kind of show you where we were at. I did hand out this document earlier, and I thought it would be useful to just tell you what's here first, and then we'll go back and actually walk through the numbers. I also want to make sure that if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to interrupt and ask. We weren't 100% sure what you wanted, but we're open to provide you any information, answer any questions we can. And if there's anything we run into that we don't have answers tonight, we certainly will get those for you and bring them back. So if there's follow-up, we certainly can do that for you. So the first page, which is up on the screen, is a summary, an expenditure summary, and this is actually from our full document book that we put out to the City Council when they review the whole document. But it's a nice summary of the expenses, and it gives you a 3-year history, and you can kind of compare actuals to budgets. Even in the right there in the center, you'll see the estimated 16-17. That's where we think we're going to end this year, and then the budget for this year and next year, and then the graph at the bottom. If you flip the page on the back sheet of that, is our financial projections for the airport fund. And I'll come back to this because I think even though there's a lot of numbers here, this gives you the best overview of the financial condition of the airport, and it really will kind of summarize all of the things that are happening and the future. The next 2 pages, and they're back and front, is actually a summary of the CIP program. The one you're going to probably want to focus is on the second page, and it's page number 4 at the bottom, because in the CIP book, but at the very top you'll see it says Operations Airport, and the 4 projects that Steve referred to earlier are listed there, so you can actually see where we've budgeted the dollars and how those come together. And again, the airport master plan at $250,000 in 17-18 and 18-19, and then the electric vault and the foreign object debris program, which are already underway. So that gives you an idea of where those are planned. If you flip another sheet, at the last couple pages we've put together are the individual project sheets for those airport CIP projects. And so you can get a little bit more detail on timing, a description, how they flow as far as completing and where the funding comes from. But that's kind of helpful to what we've given you. So I'm going to actually bring you back to the back page of the first page, which is the financial projections for the airport fund. And again, I know there's a lot of numbers here, but what you're looking at is where we think we're going to end this year and then 5 years of projections. So I like this because it gives you sort of a good view of where we're going in the future. And I'm going to focus, do you mind if I, oops. I'm going to focus, maybe I'll just point at it. I'm going to focus on the left-hand side on the 2 columns, the estimated 16-17, and then kind of that middle column, the proposed 17 and 18. And so it's the year we're currently in and how we are estimating we'll end this year financially, and then our budget for next year, what we have proposed. Starting at the top, you'll see that the first third of the page is actually all of the revenue sources. And I'm going to take you to the bottom where it says total revenues, about a third of the way down the page. If you compare estimated 16-17 to 17-18, you will see a huge increase. It's about 3 times as much. As an ongoing rule in the airport fund, if you go up about 2/3, you'll see the grant line. It's the 5th from the top. That is the number that seems to really fluctuate from year to year, and it's really the driving factor in what drives the expenses and the revenues up and down. And again, it's mostly the FAA, ADOT funding that you've talked about for capital projects. But you can see that that's the reason that we go from $589,000 this year to $1.7 million next year. And then as you go out, you can see that, as Steve mentioned earlier, there is no grant funding plugged in the next 3 years out, the last 3 years, because those haven't been applied for or determined and there's not projects in there. But that's the deciding factor. The other thing that I would tell you is if you go out to fiscal year 1920 under projections and go down to the total revenues, the $512,000, this is a good representation of the total revenue that is generated at the airport from just the user fees and the ongoing operations. So really, if you think about it, all of the fees out there are just over $500,000. If you kind of scroll your eye across some of those user fees from the left to the right, you'll see that for the most part, the user fees are really consistent from year to year. It's a consistent user base. Any increases and decreases are mostly going to be related to small increases in fees when they do cost of living, that sort of thing. But that core $500,000 is pretty stable and can be counted on from year to year. So I'm going to take you down to the expenditures, which is kind of the middle third of the long-range plan there. And again, if you drop to the total expenditures about halfway down the page, you'll see that big change between the estimate and the proposed, and you can see some of the fluctuations going out. Again, that's going to be tied, it's tied to grants, but it's the Community Investment Program, which is the third expenditure down, which are those capital projects. And so those are the programs we looked at farther into the brochure, and again, the reason that we have such fluctuations in the airport revenues and expenditures. Otherwise, going back to the top, the personnel, you can see that's pretty consistent. We actually have a drop between the budget for 16-17 and then where we're going to end up. That's actually a part-time position that the funding was removed between 16-17 and 17-18 because it just hadn't been hired. So that saved about $12,000. Operations and maintenance are going to be essentially the supplies and services that support the operations of the airport. If you look at proposed 17-18 and 18-19, you'll see a big increase. It goes from $151,000 to $505,000 and then to $408,000. That big increase is that $250,000 in 17-18 and 18-19 to support the new airport master plan. In addition to that, in 17-18, there's $90,000. That's a continuation. It's a carry forward of the ARC electric capital project, which is putting all the warnings and the signs on the electrical systems out there. So that's the big increase there. Again, the community investment program, that $1,057,000 actually will tie back to the summary on the other sheets. The contingency number there is the $7,000, and this is really, it's a small emergency fund is what it is. And in my time here and in talking to all the staff, that has never been used in the airport, but it is there, and it allows, if there was ever something where we needed additional budget authorization, it kind of holds that place for those emergency funds. Obviously, $7,000 is not a lot, and it's going to be a pretty small emergency, but it is there for that purpose. Depreciation is another one that I wanted to kind of point out. It's right smack in the middle, and you'll see that it ranges from about $708,000 up closer to $800,000 per year. This is a non-cash entry, and it's required by generally accepted accounting principles. We have to add it in. And what it is it's recognizing using up the assets out at the airport. And you can't see it here, but if you went and looked at our financial statements, the value of the airport in total, including everything that's out there, is about $15 million net of depreciation, and that's kind of recognizing that every year that useful life gets to be less and less and the wear and tear that it takes. Quickly, and I'll point you down, just if you jump back down to the total expenditures, the line up above it, you can see that we always back that out for budget purposes, and that's because, again, it's not a cash expense, but we need to recognize it. So it puts us back to a cash basis. The next three lines, the interfund cost allocations, those are actually charging, because the airport is a division of the city government, all of the overhead that supports the airport, these are going to be those charges. So it's a little bit of everything. For example, under the support services, a little bit of Cassandra's time, a little bit of my time are included. Actually, Cal, as a city council member, there's a tiny bit of his costs that are included there. The city clerk, the city manager, the city attorney, city engineering. So it's a little bit of everything that supports the ongoing operations from the administrative level.
Can I ask you a question about?
Of course.
How do you arrive at those dollar figures to
So actually, Cassandra has a pretty complicated formula, and she goes through and looks at, in each department, we have what we call a cost factor. And I'll just give you an example of a few, and I'm happy to give this to you. So for example, City Council, we actually look at the number of agenda minutes that are tied to airport issues, and that's how we allocate City Council cost. The City Manager, we look at how many number of agenda items are related to the airport, and that's a portion of the cost. We do all of the human resources, payroll, things like that are driven by the number of employees, so benefits, those sorts of things. Most of the time, for most of the financial stuff, like my department, it's going to be driven by the size of the budget, the number of invoices for accounts payable that are processed, or for accounts receivable, it's going to be the number of invoices that are processed. So we got to go through that whole process. The number for maintenance, the interfund cost allocation for maintenance, is actually tied to, I believe it's now 2 employees that provide services out there regularly, and that's their cost plus the overhead.
So theirs is basically their salaries, their time is all.
Their
allocated
salaries,
at
their
the
time, and then any additional costs that aren't directly charged to the airport are going to be included in that 144,000, and then any overhead that might exist there. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the debt expenses associated with the small amounts of financing we've done, kind of unrelated to this issue, the expenditure limitation, we've been issuing debt to kind of avoid an administrative issue, and I certainly am more than willing to come back and talk about that at any time. But that's the reason there's a little bit of debt, because there's been borrowing associated with the airport. So again, you can see when you get to those total expenditures, sort of the ups and downs. The current year resources, this is really your net operations. So it takes the revenues minus the expenditures. Unfortunately, as you can see, with all of the cost involved, it does run at a negative. And that brings us to the next line, which is the operating transfers in and out. And you'll see that the general fund, which is the main fund of the city government and supports most of the services, provides sort of an ongoing subsidy to net those costs out to zero. I will tell you, if you look under budget 16-17 and estimated fiscal year 16-17 under operating transfers, you'll see a vehicle replacement fund. This is a one-time transfer. It's an accounting thing that we did. Many years ago, the city actually paid into a vehicle replacement fund. All of the departments paid in. That money was accumulated, and it was there to support ongoing cost of vehicles and replacement. When they hit the recession back in 2009-10, in order to balance the budget, the city stopped funding this, but we still had a pot of money sitting out there, and it was just sitting, and we weren't doing anything with it. So we went back, tracked it back to which departments or which funds, in this case, paid it in and reimbursed it to the fund. So that's the money coming back into the airport fund that had been sitting there. Kind of drawing down to that last box, the beginning available resources and then the ending available resources. As you can see, there isn't any extra in the airport. I mean, we basically, because of the general fund subsidy on an ongoing basis, there's very little that accumulates in this particular fund to kind of go out into the future. Any questions on this page or any of the items or anything I can explain a little better?
Anybody on the board, please feel free to ask questions when you have them.
Okay.
Why not?
And again, I think the CIP is pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I can't tell you details about the projects because all I do is plug the numbers, but.
Well, for one, I appreciate that. This is exactly what I needed to know about how budgets are done, and I'll spend some time going over this, and we might have
Okay.
questions at a later date.
Yeah, and certainly let Siva Rondi know, and we'd be happy to either come back and/or provide even additional information. And we periodically do reports and updates, so if you're ever interested in kind of getting quarterly updates on how things are operating through the year, we'd be happy to provide those because we do them for City Council.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so at this time, we'd like to open it up to any comments from anyone in the audience. Okay, seeing none, we'll go on. Thank you very much again. Good presentation, and that complies with my need of Budget 101 to get me involved in it enough that I can start going through the lines and come up with questions if there's anything that I have a question about, or anybody else on the board for that matter. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item for a public hearing is it says approved, but actually we're just discussing airport vision statement. That's probably also tied with to the upcoming proposed revision of our master plan. But Ben, you were in charge of the committee for that. Do you have anything that you want to update on at this time?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick update. I must admit, Steve did most, if not all, the work on this one. But the reason that we came to this discussion was at one point, a couple of meetings ago, we had a proposed statement that was pretty short and sweet. And so I think I brought it up that said maybe we should discuss that a little bit more. And so what's been done so far is we went through a list of 6 or 8 different airports and looked at what their vision statements were. And actually, it turns out they're mostly short and sweet. And so Steve and I had discussed looking at these and maybe if we could compare it to the other one that we had and see if we want to make an adjustment or leave it as is and then make a recommendation to you or the board or whatever on the next one. But I think a lot of it was the differentiation between a vision statement and a mission statement. And so now that we've had an opportunity to look, a lot of these that Steve collected for us have both. And so it's much more clear what the difference is. And so I think it'd be easy for us to come up with either a suggestion to keep the one we had or a proposed new one and then go from there. So
Is it your thinking that we should put this together to present as part of the new airport master plan, or should we go forward with it on its own?
I suppose I haven't formulated a complete opinion on that. I think that it probably will need to be included in the master plan, but whether or not it serves a benefit prior to that, I'd accept input. But it's easy enough to do looking at the work that's been done to say we like it or we don't like it. I can't quite remember. Did we already have one and we're changing it, or we're building one?
No, we didn't have one.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
to give some input to your question, I believe that it should be done prior to the master plan because it will help drive that master plan and the completion of that and what we would like to see happen there, and so on and so forth. So that's what vision and mission statements actually do, in my view, that they kind of drive the organization in a direction. I think it would help with the master plan.
Any other comments?
So, having said that, I think it would be relatively easy for Steve and I to give you something to look at the next meeting, and you can decide then if you want to proceed with that and accept it or keep working on it.
Any other comments from anyone on the board? Any comments from anyone in the public? Okay, we'll just table it as a future agenda item for the next meeting, and we'll plan on presenting your recommendations to the board and plan on voting on it at that time.
Okay, sounds good. Is that okay with you, Steve?
That's fine.
Item 7.3 is the local application of the new FAA hangar use policy, and I know that Mr. Johnson has produced a draft policy that I believe has been staffed, and I will turn it over to you to present your proposed policy.
This is a regurgitation of what you've seen from the FAA. Little more detail, and in essence, not a whole lot of changes, a few words here and there. The same basic premise that we've been talking about in the past, about a page and a half, page and a quarter, relatively simple. The intent is that once this is approved by you, or we make any adjustments and then move forward with that as approved, there'll be a cover letter, there'll be this, they'll be mailed out to all of our tenants, they'll be posted, and then we'll go towards beyond this venue, a public meeting, at least one at the airport, maybe more than that, where people can come in and comment. Now, again, the timing, as you're all aware, is not real hot on that, given the fact that many of our users, as the temperature has gone up, they've vamoosed, and they won't be back for a few months. But nonetheless, we still want to move forward with this. And in discussing it casually with the fire department, when we start doing inspections, it'll be a combo fire department airport dynamic. Either I or Rondi will be on every inspection with the fire department. And so they'll be looking at the usual fire department dynamics, building code, hazards in that nature, and we'll be looking at this aspect. But as you can see, it's pretty much the same dynamic that you've seen before. The language is a little different. It's a little simpler. But that'll be one of the things in the cover letter is the website to go to the FAA and to look at the questions and all the details and all the drive down information in regards to what's copacetic and what isn't in a hangar.
Any questions?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I might suggest that, first of all, I appreciate the simplicity of the document. I was a big proponent of that in the beginning, and I think that'll make life a lot easier for us. But I might suggest that the idea that somebody involved in aviation in this day and age of technology that we live in might not have a valid excuse for not understanding the rules because they moved away for the summer. Meaning, I would say that if we have a policy and we've accepted it and the rules are the rules, we shouldn't get a free pass for somebody that says, well, I'm a snowbird and I'm just going to leave all my illegal stuff in the hangar for now and I'll worry about it next year. That's just my opinion. But in this age of technology, a cell phone or a computer gets us anywhere in the world in a few minutes. So I'm going to leave my RV or my boat in my hangar for 6 more months isn't a very valid sort of reason. You know what I'm saying? That's my comment on that. So.
I'm just curious, on item 6, it says city will routinely monitor hangar usage. What kind of frequency did you have in mind?
Something in the range of either once a year or once every year and a half.
And that's a requirement by the FAA order as well. In my review of this, it's a lot simpler, a lot easier to understand. I don't believe that we've added anything in this document that was not in place in the FAA order to begin with. And I think we've covered everything as well. So I personally am quite pleased with what you've come up with here. Any other comments from anyone on board?
Excuse me, that is not to say that if there is a policy adjustment, we're not going to use the word change, but we know the FAA says this is the way it's going to be, and 6 months later they change something. Or we get wind of policy direction, because I do talk with them at least 2 or 3 times a month. We will adjust, but at this point, really didn't drive into the weeds on a whole lot of detail. And again, as you read through this, it's one of the more clear documents you'll get out of the FAA. That is not to say that it's something you can utilize to rebuild an electrical circuit by any means. There are still some hazy judgment factors in here that they have chosen not to address. They are going to be forced to address them, but until that time, we're not going to go down that road. And so what you said is very true. We did not add anything into this at all. I think we promised that we would not do that. We would stick to the federal standard. And so in saying what I'm saying, it's a matter of, okay, well, if they adjust their standard a wee bit, we'll adjust appropriately. But again, should that happen, and it should be a major thing or even a middle of the road thing, we'll be coming back to you and the tenants as well.
I'd like to open it up for any comments from anyone here. Seeing none. Any more discussion? I would entertain a motion to support this policy as written.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to support it.
Second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Unanimously approved, Rundy. The next item is 7.4, discuss closing of active movement areas, and this has to do with complaints that were generated by one of our fixed-base operators arbitrarily closing Alpha Taxiway to refuel military helicopters on more than once. And I'll turn it once again over to you, having worked this issue.
A number of years ago, maybe 3 or 4, a large group of helicopters came in, and as a test basis, we did close the northern portion of Alpha Taxiway. And if I recall, it was a 20-plus number of helicopters, large, medium, military. Although that worked in that instance, it required staff to get ahead of it, be on the radio, be outside. In a sense, I won't say air traffic control, but giving guidance that you know, the taxi was blocked, all that. So in an emergency situation, say if we had an earthquake and Highway 95 was impassable, okay, yeah, that's doable, and we can do it, and it will work. But practically, since at the north end of the airport, we only have one taxi way that supports the runway, it's just not practical. So that being the case, as the chairman outlined, we've had a couple situations this year, a couple of months ago actually, where unbeknownst to us, a number of helicopters landed and got fueled. And I think it was the second time around where we noticed there was an issue. We started getting complaints from users at the airport that they'd have to back taxi on the runway, which was, in a sense, what I was talking about with the connector that we're going to be working on here, which is a different topic. But there was no notice. We did not do a NOTAM. There was nothing on the AWOS. And that's just not acceptable. Plus, there was it seemed a practice beginning where thought process where anybody on the airport can close a movement area, and frankly, you can't. That's up to the airport sponsor, and typically it's a situation where you have a airplane incident or an accident or something of that nature. So, in talking that through, and actually, I think as I outlined in my report on April 24th, we had a whole 21 different helicopters, 4 large ones and a whole mess of others that came through, and the 2 FBOs at the airport cooperated. They divided up the catch. They parked everybody. Everything was safe. It was proven that it could be done on the ramps, and again, as you know, we have the terminal ramp there that typically is not used for much, and so there's no point in closing down taxiways, and people have been advised that the airport can do it. Businesses at the airport should not and could not, they should not do it, and we left it at that. But it's been proven that it can be done safely, and the fact that both of the major businesses out there cooperated and made it happen, I mean, pretty much sets the bench that no, they can do this and not close any of the movement areas. And again, the movement areas in this case would be the runway, taxiway Alpha, any of the connectors. We have plenty of public use ramp at the north ramp and the central ramp and the terminal ramp that can be utilized for this.
So to summarize, you've assessed the situation and determined there's plenty of parking, and the FBOs are both aware that they have access to that parking in these conditions, and the taxiway will no longer be closed. Is that?
That is correct.
Any other questions from anyone? This did generate several complaints to me, and I know some complaints to you as well. This is set up as a public hearing as well. Any comments from anyone? Seeing none, I don't know that this requires a vote, other than to say, I think you've taken care of the problem, and it seems to be acceptable. Any other comments from the board on?
I appreciate you handling that. I was one of the people taxing out and facing a line of cones and nothing around and just, what's going on?
Steve, when you corrected the situation, were you given any verbal assurances that they would change that behavior?
There were a number of conversations. The initial one, no. One where I think at the time we had a C-130 on the terminal ramp. In that instance, we were sort of SOL. I mean, there was nowhere else to put anybody. And we had one airplane up on the north ramp that traditionally has been up there, which I think is now for sale. He wants to move that down to the main ramp because he wants to get it sold. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to keep the north ramp open as well. So the answer to your question is initially a request, oh, well, there's C-130s there, we can't do anything. And I said, okay, fine, in this instance. Beyond that, sort of a grudging, well, I guess okay. And then the fact that they both got together, split the business when that 121 ship group came through. I think that's pretty much set the precedent from this point forward. When a large group's going to come through, oh, let's get together, let's plan it out, and they figure out how they want to deal with it. But again, the key being attempting not to close any of the movement areas. And if a movement area is going to be closed, the airport's advised. And then on top of that, I issue a NOTAM. I'm on the Unicom frequency, and we're an active participant in it.
So given all the negatives to closing the active movement area without those things happening, is there any plan or contingency for how to deal with that problem should it arise, even though they've given the verbal assurance that it won't?
At this point, we didn't take it any further than that, because that basically means we start to formulate some new rules, and for lack
So
of a
would
better
we-
way to put it, kind of a truth or consequence dynamic.
Yeah.
Didn't want to go down that road at this point.
I guess what I'm asking is, would we need a new rule, or is there already a rule that you could point out that they were in violation of, and here are the consequences for breaking that rule? Do we need a new rule, or?
In my mind, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and at this point, I would say no. If this becomes a problem down the road, then I would say yes.
Fair enough.
Any other comments? That concludes our regular agenda items. Open up to anyone on the board that has anything they'd like on a future agenda, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
we've been trying to get a presentation from the Civil Air Patrol. We've just been rescheduling is all, so maybe we could put that on next meeting budget.
That's fine. Anyone else?
If you'd like to add, we can give a suggestion for a vision statement. We can put that on there.
Yes, please. In addition, based on the report that we were given tonight, I have a couple items that I'd like on there. The pavement condition concerns, both on the ramp and taxiways and runway. And I'd like to revisit the CIP and the lack of any federal grant plans going forward for several years. I also have an admin announcement. We anticipate having 2 pilot member positions open and 3 alternate positions open. So if there's anyone in the greater Lake Havasu City area that would like to volunteer to be a member of this board, we would invite you to go to the city website, download the application form, and take it to the city clerk so that the process can begin. At this time, is there anything else any board member would like to speak on?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to respond to your last statement, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but I did turn my application in for renewal.
Yeah, I am aware of that.
Very well.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Without objection, we are adjourned.